You're listening to the Salty Sex Cast with Pamela and Mariah.
Yeah, and what's puberty?
The sex education you wish you had in high school.
Maybe a diagram will help.
Hello, and welcome to the Salty Sex Cast. It is episode 63, and it's Mariah here with a wonderful guest, Christine DELOZIER, who's coming on phone interview. So I was waiting for someone else to help talk, and I just realized I'm by myself because Pamela's not here, and she's sorely missed right now.
I'll do my best, but I'm no Pamela.
I know. Thanks, Brady. I appreciate it. So, hello, Christine. You are a acupuncturist, herbalist, and author. Tell us a little bit more.
Sure. So I specialize in treating sexual health in my private practice. And so I help male and females to have, and of all genders and identities, to have better sex. We start with acupuncture, and I also work with patients one-on-one to develop dietary habits which support their treatment goals. So a long time ago, I trained to be a research scientist, and I've carried that over into my practice with my patients, and I've done a lot of research to discover ways to have better sex through diet. So I discovered so many ways through research. There was so much research to support this that I wrote an entire book about it.
That's fantastic. And this book is called Diet for Great Sex. And so you were just prompted because of all of the knowledge that you have gone through. And, you know, who do you feel like this book is best meant for?
I would say this book it has a pretty broad appeal because all of us would like to have better sex, and all of us can have better sex. The earlier, the better. You know, the earlier you start taking care of yourself, the better your sex will be throughout the duration of your life. And, you know, we think of great sex as a psychological phenomenon, you know, the right person, the right mood. But physiologically, great sex is when our nerves fire rapid, strong impulses to and from our genitals. It's when our blood vessels are delivering adequate blood flow. And this is important for females as well as males because, you know, we all know that males need adequate blood flow, but females need adequate blood flow for pleasure, for orgasm, for lubrication, for our overall arousal response. And then thirdly is balanced sex hormones. So when all of those things are working optimally, we will have optimal pleasure.
Yeah, we need to fuel all those things that are kind of in the inner workings for pleasure.
Exactly. And diet affects all of those. There's tons of research to support that too. And there's research as well to support the idea that we can have a more responsive genitalia, for example, that's more responsive to our partner's touch simply through eating better foods.
Wow. If all of us just knew, you know, what to eat to be able to experience that, obviously, you know, reading this book will help with that. What else can be found like in this book?
Sure. So the first part of the book, we talked about the science of a great sex diet. So every kind of dietary recommendation in the book is supported by a huge amount of scientific research, but it's also done in a really fun and conversational way. So, you know, when I wrote the book, I said, you know what, there's so much medical jargon. I don't want this to be one of those really boring, you know, medical books, but I also wanted it to be solidly supported by medical and scientific research. So I reviewed, you know, countless clinical and epidemiological studies, but I wrote it in a way that is fun and easy to absorb. So there's that. The first part is the science, and then we move into some of the traditional Chinese dietary recommendations. What did, you know, traditional Chinese medicine, how did they conceptualize great sex and how to have it through through our diets. And then later on in the book, we talk about some other kind of environmental factors that affect our hormonal balance, that affect us physiologically and in sexual function. And finally, just to kind of pull it all together, we've got some meal plans, recipes, other recommendations, and as a bonus, there's an entire chapter dedicated to tips on oral sex.
Oh.
So that we can take care of our partner.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I love that, it's all evidence-based from your book, obviously with all the research and everything that you've completed on it. However, it's easy to read. I can't tell you how many books I've read on these kinds of things, and it's just so dry and boring. And that's not what we want when we are talking about sex, right? We want it fun.
Wet and exciting, not dry and boring.
Exactly. Well, definitely not. I mean, all the books that I see out there, not on this subject in particular, but so many books are either one or the other. Either they're fun and funny, but they don't have much substance, not much meat, on it,
Mm-hmm.
or they've got tons of meat on it, but who the heck wants to read it, because it's so boring. So I just kind of wanted to make it, make it something that people like to read and gives them a lot of great information.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. I mean, that's why we have this podcast. We want it fun, but also accurate and educational as well. So in your book, you talk about the trifecta of great sex. Can you explain a little bit more on this?
Sure. The trifecta is, blood flow, nerves, and sex hormones. Those three things, when those are operating at their best, sex is at its best as well. So, when our partner touches us, the first thing that happens is we have nerve impulses that travel, from our genitals to our brain, to our spinal cord. Some of them are reflexive, this signal goes from the genitals to the spine and triggers arousal. Some of them are go up to the brain and signals pleasure, signals, again, the whole arousal cascade. So, and then what happens is we get an influx of blood to the vagina, the clitoris, and the penis, depending on the person. And this is what, initiates erection or clitoral, filling the clitoris with blood and getting that clitoral erection as well. And depending on how strong these nerves fire, that determines how much pleasure we have. When we've got, so for example, if you look at people with type 2 diabetes, one of the big side effects of that is that they get nerve damage, which affects them sexually. So sexual dysfunction is a huge side effect. But, you don't have to be diabetic to be concerned about how quickly your nerves fire. But anyways, but for example, when those nerves fire slowly, we know that that there's not as much pleasure. So in the case of females, they get more difficulty achieving orgasm, more, difficult, not as sensitive to their partner's touch, that sort of thing. We know, for example, that when we supplement patients with diabetes with antioxidants, these nerves fire stronger, quicker nerve impulses, and that they have higher sexual satisfaction.
Yeah, it's all about what you're putting inside your body to take care of your body, to have it work optimally. Optimally? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Look, am I making up words today? So, that diet really does affect our sex lives. You're talking about nerve endings and hormones. Typically, most people don't go to diet when they're thinking of optimal sexuality, right?
Right.
So how do you talk to your clients even about diet and saying, hey, have you started with this? Is this, what's something that you kind of start with to pitch that?
Just, suggesting that, first of all, there's a lot of evidence to support it. It's not, it's not something that we would initially, instinctively think, oh yeah, I'm going to go towards diet, but it works. And there's there's research to support it. There are case studies to support it. I have evidence from my practice that shows that it does work. People are a lot more satisfied in their sexual lives when they change their diet. But everybody is different on this pathway towards, changing your diet. Some people are really excited and they want to make a big change. They want to completely revamp their diet, throw out everything in the refrigerator and, go to Trader Joe's and stock up on the healthy stuff. And other people just want, don't want to be overwhelmed. So one of the first things that I like to try with patients is changing your weekly lunch. So, nobody wants to go out with their friends to eat and then be eating a salad while everybody's having like a big, steak or cheeseburger or something.
Oh, so I was hoping you didn't say steak.
Brady's hungry.
You bummed me out. So I can't have steak for better sex. All right. I'll put that on the list.
Well, those are the hard changes. The easy changes are maybe just changing your lunch every day. If you're going to work anyways, it's not like you're hanging out with your friends. Change your lunch. Bring one of the best things that you could have for a healthy sex lunch is a big, huge leafy green salad with baked yam or some squash. And there are a couple of reasons for that. So leaves are probably the absolute best thing that you could put in your body for great sex. And they have so much to bring to the table. First of all, they are high in naturally occurring nitrates, which dilate blood vessels. Mm-hmm. They promote vascular health. So they're good in the short term and in the long term. They also reduce cortisol levels. They have phytonutrients which reduce cortisol and therefore help optimize testosterone. So cortisol, for anybody who doesn't know, is a stress hormone which can completely sabotage testosterone. And that's not just important for male sexual function and libido. It's also very important for female libido and other things as well. So it helps optimize testosterone. It also contains lots and lots of minerals, which are great, and antioxidants, which are great for helping speed nerve conduction. So again, it addresses that entire trifecta of great sex in just one single food. And then you've got yam or baked squash or something. Those are both high in potassium. Mm-hmm. So humans used to get about 10 times as much potassium in their diets as sodium. Now, in modern times, with all the processed foods and we're busy and we aren't able to prepare meals, we take in about 10 times as much sodium as potassium. And that wreaks havoc on our blood vessels, and including the blood vessels leading to the clitoris and the penis and the vagina. So eating a higher potassium diet, it offsets this damage by salt, and it also, in and of itself, promotes vascular health. It protects that delicate inner lining of blood vessels and helps make them more elastic and able to deliver more blood flow.
Wow. Yes, there's so much going into just that one meal that you can start. I know when people hear diet, they kind of automatically start panicking and think, oh my gosh, there goes all of my freedoms. I really enjoy food. Like they think it's going to be a miserable experience, probably because of the diet culture that's out there. So, what foods are you finding that people are still very much enjoying and don't feel like they have to completely, bodge out, get rid of everything that they enjoy, but still have that benefit?
Yeah. So, diet culture is this idea that we need to beat our bodies into submission, that you can't enjoy food anymore. Yeah. Nope. You've got to just live a life of complete, denial and, denying your body. But, remember, we've got 7 days in a week. We've got 21 meals. And honestly, when we nourish our bodies and really are kind to our bodies through the foods that we eat, we enjoy the few meals even more that do have maybe higher fat and higher sodium and all those other things. So I don't ever like to tell patients to just completely, never eat the foods that you like, because I don't think that's really sustainable. And especially when we're socializing with our friends and we go out for a meal, we want to kind of unwind and enjoy that a little bit. But when you can have 18 or 19 good meals in the week, and you've got 3 that you are splurging a little bit, you can still have a great sex diet. So it's especially sometimes what I tell patients is this, because we don't want to feel constantly deprived.
Yeah.
Maybe try to, during the work week, that's your work week. That's the time when you buckle down and you are a little bit more disciplined. So try to make all those, say 5 days a week, be a little bit more strict, and then a little less strict on the weekends. And you will feel better. So you get the benefit of that as well. People who follow a diet where you have, for example, having a salad every day for lunch with a nice, really leafy greens like spinach and romaine and all those vegetables, you'll have more energy. Your body will be delivering more oxygen to your muscles. You have less fatigue. So it's just overall, you just feel better.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. You tell anyone, hey, eat better and you're going to perform better. You're going to enjoy sex more. I think way more people would be eating better. Just telling them that, hey,
right.
How's your bedroom health? This will affect your bedroom health. This and this and this reason. I mean, I think we would just have a healthier society in general.
Well, I for one have been saying all along that if we told people that the coronavirus caused erectile dysfunction, that we would have beat this a year ago. It would have made it. It would have made it a week into the United States, and we would have solved this problem. I do have one question though.
Yeah.
When I go to the store and I go shopping, I see keto cupcakes. Where are the sex Oreos, and when are you going to market those?
Oh my goodness.
Well, okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the sex Oreos, okay? Unfortunately, the sex Oreos might taste pretty good, and you can, I'm sure, use them in lots of fun ways, but immediately after eating a really sugary meal like that, testosterone just takes a dive.
Yeah.
So that's a short-term and long-term, you get long-term hormonal disruption and even a short-term decline. So that's not what you want to be having on date night for sure.
Oh, I can't tell you, heavy meals or just not good meals. And then you're
Sushi always ruins it for me.
You're just bloated.
I eat too much of it.
I know. So just having those meals and knowing, hey, we're setting ourselves up for a good evening with this meal and then what we're going to be doing after. How fun is that? I would love to know a little bit more of like the female libido and everything and how diet affects that, because we have so much research to help men and what helps with that. But I feel like sometimes women get shelved a little bit in that area because, our performance really isn't dependent on a few things like, an erection. So
Right. Our anatomy works. We could have sex whether or not we like it, whether we have a libido or we don't, we still could have sex.
Yeah.
So, research has always focused more on male sexual function, male sexual pleasure. And, relationships have typically more focused on male sexual pleasure. But the principles, quite honestly, are very similar. I saw so much research that was equally applicable. Many of them were studies on males. There were plenty of studies on females as well. And the mechanism is the same. Both male and female, we want blood flow. Blood flow is definitely big for that arousal response. For libido, our sex hormones are really crucial in libido. And there's so many things that really do disrupt our sex hormones, both diet and then in the environment in which we live nowadays. We're exposed to a lot of different substances in our air and our water that I wasn't sure what I was going to find in the research when I took a look at this. I was curious. I was thinking, I wonder, you hear so much talk about, how environmental toxins, affect us, but what's the science on it? Do we know scientifically that this is true, and we do, absolutely. There's tons and tons of research to show that what the cadmium and, other toxic heavy metals that we're exposed to on a regular basis. We're not talking about, living next to a factory that's dumping. We're talking about just everyday people living in everyday society, and what they're exposed to on a regular basis does absolutely disrupt sex hormones. And so, but there are ways that you can deal with that as well. And particularly for something like libido, we definitely want to, for female libido and male libido, we definitely want to be optimizing this balance of hormones. One of the things we can do is this. All of these environmental toxins, the studies have shown that our bodies absorb less of them when we keep our mineral status high. So when we're eating that salad for lunch, for example, the dark leafy green salad, with some broccoli and, with our baked yam, the more things like magnesium and calcium that we're taking in our diet, the less our bodies will absorb those environmental toxins. And that's been shown in research. And then as far as dealing with damage from environmental toxins, upping our antioxidants is one thing that was shown consistently in research, so upping, vitamin C, vitamin A and things like that was shown to offset a lot of the damage, because a lot of the damage is in oxidative stress. So these antioxidants basically helped with that. It's not just a hormonal thing, it's also a nerve thing. So it affects nerve function and it affects our hormones. But so sorry if that's like a little bit of a skip, as far as your question about female, addressing female concerns. Let me see. Another thing is just a shift in our attitude towards that, because more research needs to be done. If we want more focus on how to help females have better sex, we need more studies that focus on females. So right now, just as in the bedroom, and this is, something that so many females complain of, is that, whether it's in porn or whether it's in society or whether it's in relationships, the focus, in porn, the acts end with male ejaculation, and there's like this token effort towards pleasing a female, and it's easy and it just comes naturally. And she's just, in ecstasy after the, with the slightest touch. And, in science, it's kind of the same thing. It's just like, we have Viagra. We have Viagra, and we have a couple studies that show that Viagra does, in fact, improve sex with females, but it's not approved for use with females. But not that, most of us, at least in the book too, we don't necessarily want to focus on the pharmaceutical approach. Many of us want to, kind of try to tackle this naturally, especially for the long term, it's like you can pop a pill, you're going to get an increase in blood flow. But if you want long-term, sexual response, you definitely want to focus on diet.
And it's just something you can do in your home. You don't need this doctor that's, prescribing this. And speaking of like what to eat and how you found that information, how did you come up with this diet plan to increase sexual pleasure?
So basically, all of it is just based on, I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies that I poured over to shape the dietary recommendations. Everything in there is just based on what available research we have on it. I'm sure that there are other pearls of, nutrition with regard to sex that they may not have been studied yet. So this focuses all on stuff that has scientific evidence to support it. So basically taking all that, and then what I looked at it from a bird's eye view and see okay, what are the general themes here? Well, one of the general themes is eat more fruits and vegetables because you'll get more antioxidants. And the antioxidants are going to help that whole, trifecta of great sex. So that's just one very general thing. But there are other specific foods that bring so much to the table. Leaves are one of them. So leaves are going to be a staple of a core part of this diet. Let's take a look at other primates, for example. If we look at other primates sit around eating tons and tons of leaves and berries, all day long. We are primates, and we've, gotten very, very far away from that. We get so much of our food that it's really unrecognizable as far as where it originated.
Oh, yes. Yeah. As I have a burger bag sitting on the table next to me right now, I feel... But that's the thing is we're definitely, not shaming any diet. We're just saying, hey, increase these things, right? Of course, there's the things that try to avoid, just like you were telling Brady with the Oreos. So increasing those fruits and vegetables, dark leafy greens is what I'm hearing is just
foods rich in potassium. I'm taking notes.
He's taking notes. Hey. And he's married to a registered dietitian, so if he's taking notes. He's listening up.
Well, there's stuff that you can do in the short term, and there's stuff that you can do in the long term. So there's both in the book. So there's like a daily, daily and weekly menus, for long term, and then there's a date night sex menu, and those are all the foods that were shown to have an immediate effect either on blood flow, or, for example, that maybe don't tank your testosterone. Because like a high fat meal has been shown in research, and a high sugar meal will tank testosterone. But and then a high fat meal will also stiffen blood vessels within a couple hours of eating it. A high salt meal will stiffen blood vessels measurably within 30 minutes of eating it. But interestingly, an omega-3 rich meal like fish actually had the opposite effect. It actually helps blood vessels be more elastic and improved arterial function within a couple hours of eating it, as opposed to, even though it's higher in fat, it still had that benefit to blood vessels.
Yeah. Yeah. So Brady, the sushi is okay for you. Just skip the rice.
I probably need to just eat less of it too.
Yeah.
Because I try to, I don't get sushi very often, so I end up eating like pounds of it.
It is so good. Yeah.
I love sushi.
So Christine, I'm curious of all the data and, research that you combed through and just really we're finding all these fantastic things to put in your book. What was maybe the most odd piece or surprising piece of evidence that you found that you were like, really? I'm just kind of curious, like an odd fact.
Yeah, the most surprising and absolutely fascinating thing that I found was all the research on mushrooms. So mushrooms, the very interesting thing about mushrooms is that they, the way they operate in the body. So they address this entire trifecta of great sex. There's tons of research showing that they benefit the cardiovascular system. They speed nerve conduction. They actually help repair nerve damage. They actually even help regrow nerves. They help encourage it, some of them, depending on the mushroom. And they help balance sex hormones. They just bring so much to the table. But the really surprising fact about them was the way that they do that. There were lots of different studies showing that mushrooms actually improve the biodiversity of, it improves the microbiome. So it increased beneficial bacteria and microorganisms while slowing growth of pathogenic bacteria. So it basically, so in each of the mushrooms brings something unique to the table. So it had a slightly different effect on the microbiome, beneficial effect. But even white button mushrooms, you don't even have to get fancy. White button mushrooms, it improved the diversity of microorganisms in the digestive tract.
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow. Just that simple, adding mushrooms into your diet and putting them on your salad. I'm always trying to I love mushrooms. So I'm always trying to figure out how to sneak them in our meals. You know, my kids don't love them, so we're always navigating that. But that's really neat.
They have an anti-inflammatory effect. They are great for the immune system, and they, have that benefit that we talked about of, the trifecta of great sex. If you want to give somebody that you care about mushrooms, and they don't like them, there's a recipe in the book for chaga chai latte. And there's this mushroom called chaga. It grows on birch trees. It is one of my favorite things. I love this mushroom. It comes in these chunks. It kind of like embeds itself in the bark of these trees. And it was used in World War II as a coffee substitute, because when you boil it, it becomes this like caramel colored, just like coffee. And you have it with honey, and it has these vanilla overtones. It tastes really nice. So there's a recipe in there for what I do is I cook my chaga with some fennel and fresh nutmeg, which also happen to be aphrodisiac, and also some cinnamon and some cardamom. I throw in a little bit of vanilla and mix it with some honey and almond milk, and it tastes delicious. It's a delicious chaga chai latte.
So Brady, instead of your sex Oreos, you get
I get tea.
You
know what though?
That sounds so good.
I'm gonna call it rationing coffee. Because I feel like if I tell people I'm having a tea, they'll look down on me. So I'm going to call it rationing coffee. So you touched on aphrodisiacs. Does your book have a list of are they like clinically studied aphrodisiacs, or are they just sort of like, most people get this response?
So all the most of the aphrodisiacs I included, there's a whole chapter on aphrodisiacs. Almost all of them had some studies that supported their efficacy.
Okay.
I threw in a few that that didn't have any scientific backing to it, like chocolate, just because I wanted to address it, because so many people, recognize chocolate as an aphrodisiac that I wanted to see if there was any evidence to support it. There have been plenty of studies trying to identify it as an aphrodisiac that have failed.
Yeah, we just want it to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I was just thinking, you mentioned high fat, high salt, and I remember being told, have a raw steak, basically, and then eat some oysters. Well, that's a lot of fat and a lot of salt.
Yeah. So
the interesting thing about oysters is that they have, I want to say, almost a full day supply of zinc in one oyster.
Mm-hmm.
There was a little bit of evidence that showed that they worked as an aphrodisiac. But the zinc is really a big one for sexual functions. Zinc is it's important in, again, maintaining optimal testosterone and some other things. So that probably has something to do with why it's known as an aphrodisiac.
Do you happen, alongside aphrodisiacs, do you talk about supplements? Because I used to, I read some stuff about horny goatweed back in the day because I was drinking an energy drink that had it in it.
Yeah, horny goatweed does have some evidence to support it. There's a few studies on it. Most of the aphrodisiacs in the book, there were 2 or 3 studies, so it's not a real strong scientific backing. But, there were a couple of studies. So yes, we did. There's a part in the book that's all herbal, herbal or animal products, like Spanish fly is talked about in the book, which is honestly pretty dangerous.
I've never used it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, so Spanish fly has been used for centuries, if not millennia. There have been so many deaths with it, and there are so many famous deaths associated with Spanish fly. I mean, there were even, royalty in France. This one queen, I think it was, used to slip some Spanish fly into her guests' dinner.
Wow!
And then she would try to blackmail them for their for their indiscretions. And then there was another famous writer who was sentenced to death in France for giving his prostitutes Spanish fly in preparation for an orgy, and they almost died. So he was sentenced to death. But there's a lot of stuff basically the amount you need to have a response in Spanish fly is very close to the toxic, value. And it's like, it's not you can't rely on it for its efficacy without going to a dose that might be toxic. But what it does work. It does bring more blood flow by irritating the genital tract, the urinary tract, basically.
Wow.
Have you read about yohimbe at all? Because that's one that I have tried that's over the counter.
Yeah.
You can pick it up at GNC, and that one I felt like the first time I took it, I was having a panic attack.
Yeah, that makes sense. That one has some research to support it. There's actually been quite a few, more studies on that than some of the other ones on yohimbe. But again, there were a few that were identified as being, effective, but also just being kind of risky. The culinary aphrodisiacs, you're going to get a really subtle effect. I mean, some of them have been studied, like cloves, for example, were shown to improve sexual satisfaction within, I think, an hour of eating them. But it's going to be a subtle effect. It's not, it's not like taking a Viagra pill or anything, but it's still fun to try it and play with it.
Well, and that's the, beauty of changing your diet for improved sexuality and sexual performance is there's really, what are the side effects to eating a healthier diet when we're looking at what are the side effects to everything else that people are trying to improve their bedroom activities. So tell me a little bit more about your practice and how you've been able to fold this into that traditional Chinese medicine and just kind of that holistic wellness component.
Sure. So specializing in sexual health in private practice, the goal with acupuncture, for example, is to move the qi. In Chinese medicine, when qi flows abundantly and freely, we have health. When qi and blood flow abundantly and freely. And we can think of qi as, a nerve impulse firing, the contraction of the heart. Blood is the more yin substance. So if we look at this, the yin and the yang, the yin is the blood, it's the fluids, it's the substance that fills the genitals. And the yang is the commander of the blood. It's the nerve impulses that command the blood to flow where we want it during sex. So what acupuncture does is, we do needles all over the body. One of the places that I typically do for erectile, to improve erections is I needle the perineum, which is an area below the vagina or testicles and in between that and the anus. And that's a major crossing point of nerves associated with sexual function. So when we stimulate that, we move the qi in that area, we stimulate that nerve pathway, and it improves sex. It improves blood flow and it improves sex. So what we want is this free flow of qi and blood, according to Chinese medicine. Now, Chinese medicine also had its own school of thought on dietary therapy. It does correlate a lot with what I found in research. There were a couple things that, a couple discrepancies, but basically when we eat rich, cloying foods, we slow down the qi. So these are like fatty, greasy, sugary, heavy foods. When we eat more light, airy foods, the qi flows more freely. We don't block it as much. And we can see, this blockage of qi, we can see it in something like plaque accumulation, or we see it physically in other ways. But the Chinese also believed that a good diet would balance the 5 flavors: salty, sweet, sour, bland, bitter. And we favor certain flavors. We favor the sweet flavor and we favor the salty flavor with all the processed foods. I mean, how do we get food to taste good? We put tons of salt in it, tons of fat, and tons of sugar. So, and what we neglect is we neglect the bitter flavor. Now, a food that would be bitter is going to be something like kale or something like spinach, or basically the leaves, again, like we were talking about earlier. So we have to bring more of the leaves in, more of the sour flavor through our nice tart fruits, and, have less of the salty and the sweet flavors.
And I'm guessing sour gummies don't count.
Brady.
No.
Nope. All right.
No.
Okay.
No.
I just wanted to double check.
Well, and it's so funny, as soon as you start changing your diet to more flavorful, and just like you were saying, the 5 palates, the tastes, you get more flavorful food. It's more enjoyable when you're getting all of those flavors and tastes instead of just one very heavy, salty or sugary or fatty, food. It's kind of like, you get fuller fat. Like, it's just not, you eat more of it because you're hoping to get more enjoyment from it, and you're getting just the same thing over and over again instead of having your plate full of all these wonderful flavors and textures. And, yeah, that's fantastic. I'm just thinking about that out loud.
Yeah, it's like a lazy way of getting our food to taste good, So if we, you can get food to taste good by just dumping some, some more salt, some more fat, sugar. But you can get something that's really fresh and healthy if you just balance those flavors. And that was actually a kind of a culinary technique as well, as just to bring all of that to a dish, and it just tastes good. So if I'm making a soup, for example, I do just that. Sweet flavor, it doesn't necessarily mean sugary. A sweet flavor in Chinese medicine could be like, rice, for example. That's a sweet flavor. Vegetables, most foods bring some kind of sweetness to it. And so when I make a soup, I balance that by, I always squeeze some fresh lemon. And even when it's like say a chicken noodle or chicken vegetable soup, I put a little of that sour in. We put some bitter greens in there. We put some of the sweet flavor. We have the salty, obviously, with the broth, and it just comes together. And, when you balance that, it is so much more delicious.
Yeah. So, kind of going on the traditional Chinese medicine and the sexual health on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't they believe on limiting sex for good health?
So that was something that I found really interesting. I did explore that notion because before the let me see, there were a couple points in Chinese history, but before that, you would want to have a lot of sex. So let's say you take the emperor, for example. The emperor would have a total of like 81 concubines. They'd have loads of concubines. They would have first-class wives, second-class wives. And the goal was to build up their vital essence with the concubines so that on the full moon, they could deliver this, essence-packed, full vitality sperm to the queen so that she would have an intelligent heir. And so it was thought that the more sex they could have with the concubines, the better the quality of their sperm would be for the queen. And so, so that was the notion back then. Then all of a sudden, in Confucianism, there was a lot of mixing in medical philosophy with government philosophy. And there was this increase in government control of people's daily lives in order to maintain control of, political and power. There was this push to control everything. And Confucius thought was just the opposite. It wasn't until then that sex, too much sex was frowned upon, and people were encouraged to conserve their essence. Now, in traditional Chinese medicine, the essence, our vital life essence, is embodied in sperm and in menses. So, so it was thought, even when this shift occurred, it was thought that sex just nourished the female. So she didn't have to worry about having too much sex unless she had sex on her period.
Interesting. Christine, are you still there?
Oh yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just thinking on that. but yeah, so basically, yes, modern traditional Chinese medicine says limit sex. Limit masturbation, limit sex, or as an alternative, you can have sex and orgasm without ejaculating. I don't know how you do that. I really don't. I don't know, but apparently that's something that's encouraged.
Brady, is that your man Kegel exercise that you've been talking about?
I mean, kind of, but I ultimately come.
Oh, okay.
Like I don't. Yeah,
you just hold it back.
Yeah, just for the time.
Okay.
But I mean, like the goal is to come. Like I don't edge.
Well, I was just like wondering if it was like an orgasm without the ejaculation. Is that what you're holding back with your man Kegels that you were talking about?
I learned how to do mine from like a nursing journal from like Weber State University. Like it was a textbook from the college up there.
Interesting. I don't know. I was just wondering. I was like,
I don't know if it's based in anything.
We should explore this more.
Yeah, I don't know if it's based in anything Chinese.
Huh. That's cool.
You might have to tell Christine what you're talking about.
Brady does these man Kegel exercises that help him hold back an orgasm. So then when the orgasm does come, it's better.
So I have an orgasm, but I don't ejaculate. And because I don't ejaculate, I can continue to have sex.
Yeah, and that's what she was just saying.
Yeah.
Oh,
and then,
wow.
And then it only works in certain positions.
Yeah.
Because I have to use muscles to hold back. And then,
right.
Yeah, and then the only problem is when I'm done holding back is it makes a mess.
Oh my goodness.
Really? Because there's so much ejaculate?
Yeah, it's almost like it's built up.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah, Brady, we'll
I taught myself how to do it. I read about it in a book, like an obscure, like, I was a gifted reader early on, and I just came across like one of my mom's nursing journals textbooks from college. And I was like 12 when I read it. And then by the time I was 16, I could do that.
Holy, wow. That's crazy.
Thanks, Brady, for your... Thanks for letting us always experiment on you and ask you what things are going on. Being the male in the room.
I have no problem with that. I'm always excited, especially if the knowledge helps people.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about the Oreos and kind of heavier, things, and fatty foods probably aren't the best for sex and sexual health. What are some other foods maybe we want to avoid or limit?
Well, those are the three big ones. High salt, high fat, and high sugar. They all have their effects.
It's funny to think about the typical American date night.
And the diet.
And the food that we eat when we go on those dates. Because, like, if I was courting a new woman, I might take her to the movie theater and buy her a trash bag full of salted popcorn.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd get the fat, you'd get the salt, you'd get, then you have it with a soda and you've got the sugar as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
The triple whammy.
I was just setting myself up for failure.
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And then like as you age and you do a little bit more mature things, we go to steakhouses and like restaurants that basically cook their food in fat and sugar and salt.
And gorge on.
And gorge. We don't just like have a normal amount. Like I'll sit down and eat, like I said, a pound of sushi. Like because I don't get to have sushi very often and like.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? If you're going out, next time you're going out, why don't you suggest to your date that you maybe have a little salmon? Do you eat meat?
Yes, I'm all about the salmon. I almost get it every single time I go out to a restaurant because I love salmon. So I hate cooking it.
What if you have a spouse who doesn't like fish?
Okay. Does she eat vegetarian? Will she eat vegetarian or vegan food?
Yeah.
Okay, so she can get a lentil dish. But if you do like fish, get a piece of salmon, get a baked potato with it, eat the skin with it, because about 40% of the potassium and other minerals are in the skin. And then get some vegetables in a salad. Then you've got a nice little sex meal.
Yeah. And
Ooh,
when you say
meal.
skin,
I like that.
you mean skin of the potato, not skin of the salmon.
Right. The
Okay.
skin of the potato. Yeah.
That's what I thought. I was like, hold on, potassium. I know that's in potatoes. Yes.
Did you say baked potato?
Yep.
Now, what if you did it mashed, but with the skin left on?
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, the biggest thing with smash, if you're going out to a restaurant, is just the fact that they oftentimes
butter
add a
and
ton
salt.
of cream.
Yeah.
And they add a lot of cream and, who knows what.
But a baked potato, they can't really slip that in there on you.
Yeah. And I
Exactly.
always ask for everything on the side when I get a baked potato and they look at me weird. But I was like, I don't want all the stuff. I love like baked sweet potatoes too, but I hate that they put all the sweetener stuff on there. I'm like, it's a sweet potato already. Why would I want more sugar on top of it and all sorts of things? So
I know. I totally agree.
Christine, it has been so enlightening, so much that we can learn. And Brady, do you mind scrolling up on the screen once more so I can make sure I'm reading the title of the book? Thank you. Diet for Great Sex, Food for Male and Female Sexual Health. And where can they get your book?
On Amazon.
On Amazon. We love Amazon.
I'm looking it up right now,
You can
actually.
find everything on Amazon. That's fantastic. And do you have anything else you'd like our listeners to hear?
Well, one of the things I talk about in the book, just to close things up, because in Chinese medicine, the physical and the psychological are inseparable. We treat both at the same time. So there's a chapter on just being kinder lovers. Great sex is wonderful if you can get your body to work the way, at its prime function. But all of that has to be in the context of viewing our partner as an equal and being kind to one another sexually in relationships and basing our sexual experience on mutual respect.
Amen. That is so well said. And that just the whole holistic part of wellness and sexual health and relationships. So important. Thank you so much for coming on. And if anyone has any questions, we can pass them along. You can email us at saltysexcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook. Brady.
Twitter.
We have a Twitter.
We have a Twitter at Salty Sexcast. I put a meme up.
Yes. And you can become a patron of the podcast at patreon.com/saltysexcast. And thank you all so much for listening and have a fantastic, salty, sexy evening, but not too much salt. Right, Christine?
Right.
Moderate your salt.
Right. All right. Bye.
Have a leafy green.
Oh, okay. You do it, Brady.
How does it usually go?
Salty? I don't know.
Stay sexy and leafy green.
I love it. Bye.
Yeah. And what's puberty?
Puberty? Well, puberty's a lot of things. Here's the piece.
When you hear about it first, it sounds very strange.
Oh, if it really bothers you, you should see a doctor. Then at puberty, certain glands begin to work, and our bodies begin to change. It enlarges the penis itself.
And there's a central opening between those two, which is called the vagina.
The sex education you wish you had in high school.
Maybe a diagram will help.